We're here at Linear today, a really popular day ticket venue in the UK, and we've actually chosen to fish Brasenose 2. Now, Brasenose 2 has got a huge head of fish in it, and there's a great chance of having a big hit of fish. And the best way of doing that, I've found, is fishing 3 rods on the same spot with a nice tightly baited area. Now, I fished here probably when it first opened, and the size of the fish has increased so well. Now you've got such a good chance of catching a 30-pounder, which is why these places get so busy. So I'm going to talk you through over the next couple of days how I approach these kinds of venues and the little tactical changes that I might make throughout the session if the bites dry up. So yeah, hopefully this will provide you with a good bit of information that you can take into your own fishing, get down here yourself and give it a go. So I'm just going to cover my general approach to these busy day ticket venues. I found that the biggest challenge is often competing with the other anglers. You know, these are really busy places, and if you've seen a fish show, the chances are that 10 other people have seen that fish show. So everyone's going to be looking to try and move there. That makes it really important when you arrive at the lake not to just jump into the first empty swim you see, and take the time, you know, to walk round, speak to a few people. And it's not the nicest thing to do, but you know, ask how long they're staying, and you might find that someone in a really good peg is leaving in the next couple of hours, and trust me, it'd be worth waiting for that peg and not jumping in a free one. Last time I came here, a couple of weeks ago, I was on Brasenose 1. I actually had to wait 6 hours to get into the peg. But once I was in there, I had a really good hit of fish. I had 16 fish and 430, so you know, waiting those 6 hours to get in there was completely irrelevant because I had a great session. So when you're actually in the peg as well, you know, the chances are over the time you're here, you might not be able to move as you would on other venues, so watercraft can become a bit irrelevant. When that's the case, it's really important that what you do is maximise the potential of the swim itself. That can mean, you know, changing between zigs, between solid bags, between single hook baits, fishing at range, fishing shorter, looking at the margins, but you've got to look at all the options you've got in that one peg rather than thinking, oh, I really want to be up at the other end of the lake, because the chances are you won't be able to do that. So what you need to do is set your stall out and make sure that when the fish do come past you, you're in the best position to catch a few. So over a couple of days, you might have 4 chances where fish will drift over your area of the lake. So it's important that you've got a good spot out in the lake. It's important you've got the rods right, the rigs right, the hook baits right, so that you really make the most of those chances. So we've got a couple of days ahead of us, so hopefully we can do that too. When I come up to Linear, the key thing is not to have a plan in your head. I've come up here far too many times, you know, with even a swim in mind, and obviously someone's in there, which throws the whole thing out the window and you have to rethink. So I would really suggest that you don't come up here with a swim in mind or even a lake in mind. So when you do that, there's obviously a number of lakes up here. You know, you could be fishing long range on some lakes, you could be fishing in the margins on others. So it's really important that you bring a set of rods and reels that allow you to cover all types of fishing you're going to be doing. I've got today with me, I've got the new Infinity range of rods, and I've actually got that in a 3 3/4 pound test curve. Now I know that sounds strong, but if I'm using solid bags with a 3-ounce lead in it, you're talking about casting a 5-ounce weight there. So you really need that backbone in the rod to help you get out there and use those sort of tactics. The other thing is, you know, I'm equally as happy using these for margin fishing, and if there's weed in the lake, you know, that strong backbone will let me pull the fish safely out of the weed. The other great thing about the Infinity range is that there's got the matching Spodding marker, and because they're the same blanks, they've got the same eye ringing, they've got the same reel seats, there's really no difference in transition between casting out your fishing rod, your marker or your spod. And I find that's just really nice, and it helps with my casting technique, helps me get the spod out there, the marker out there or the lead out there nice and accurately and consistently. The next thing is the reels. Obviously I might be fishing close in, I might be fishing far out. So it's really important that I have a big pit reel because that will cover all those options. Today I'm using the Basia 45 SCW QDs, and I've got those balanced up with the Infinities, which is the ideal setup to bring to places like this. The other really important thing is to have spare spools. Now, Linear's got a whole different range of venues, and some of them are weedy, some of them aren't, some of them you're fishing close in, some of them you're fishing far out. So having spare spools means I can, once I'm in my swim and I've found the spot I'm going to be fishing, I'll put the spool on to match the situation I'm in. So if I'm fishing close in, or in a weedy spot, I can get away with stronger line, and I'll put the 15-pound spool on. If I'm fishing far out like I am now, I've got spools with 10-pound line and a shock leader. So, you know, it's a really big advantage to be able to chop and change, because the last thing you want to do is end up in a swim like this, only have 15-pound line on and not be able to reach the fish out there that you can see showing. So spare spools are a really key thing when you're coming up to busy places like this, where you're not sure what swim or what lake you're going to end up in. So once you're in your chosen swim, the next most important thing is to find the actual spot out in the lake that you're going to be fishing to and presenting your rigs on. That can vary between different lakes, but for me on here, that typically means finding a really hard, clean area where I know that the fish have been feeding. If I can find a spot with a bit of weed next to it, that's even better, because the weed holds some natural food, and it's often an area where the fish will hang around and hopefully they'll be drawn onto your baited area away from that. So yeah, I will generally try and find a really hard spot in here, and to do that you need a dedicated marker rod and reel. Now, the marker rod itself is similar to a spod rod, but it's slightly tippier. So this is a 4.25 pound test curve rod, but the tip, the tip being a bit softer lets you transmit what you're feeling out in the lake back through the rod, so you have a good idea of whether you're on gravel, or if you're in weed or over silt. The next thing I'm using here is a crosscast spod 45 SCW. Any big pit reel you can use, but this is the one I've got on the rod today. The key thing here is that it's loaded up with braid. Now, braid is a non-stretch material, and it's absolutely essential when trying to feature find out in the lake. This is J braid 8 strand, and I've got 20-pound main line, but then I'll typically use a 40 or 50-pound shock leader to absorb the cast. So what this really is key for is, it said, there's no stretch in that at all. So what this does is it lets you, as you drag the lead across the bottom, it will vibrate over the different bed. If you're on gravel, it will vibrate, or if you're on silt, it will pull back really smoothly. So without the braid, if you just had mono on here, you wouldn't feel any of that. So it's an absolutely a vital bit of kit that you have to get when you're coming to places like this. So I've mentioned about the importance of finding that spot. So generally I have a 3-step process that I go through to achieve that result. I'll start off by casting just a straight bare lead out into the lake. That will allow me to get an initial drop, but also if there is weed out there, it won't catch a load of weed up and spend hours pulling tons of weed into the swim. So generally I'd start with a bare lead and I'd cast that around until I think I'd found a nice clean area. Once I've found that area, I'll then take that lead off and I'll actually put like a gripper type lead on. I'll cast that out, hit the clip, and I'll drag that over the spot, and that will actually catch any bits of weed or debris that might be on the spot that I didn't feel with the bare lead. So that will give me a really good idea of what I'll be fishing over and what I'll be presenting the rigs on. Once I've then happy with that, and that I'm happy it's clean and there's nothing that's going to impact the presentation, I'll always end with the marker float, because zig rigs are a really important bit of a really important tactic you can use on here. So understanding the depth of the water I'm fishing in is really key, because I don't know whether I'll be fishing a foot under the surface or 6 foot under the surface. And these lakes, especially B2, are very undulating. So you could be in 20 foot of water, but then 6 foot to your right you're in 5 foot of water, so it's really key to know these depths, and you can do that with a marker float setup. When I come fishing at Linear, I'm aiming for a hit of fish. I'm not coming up here to catch 1 or 2 because it's quite a long way for me, it's quite expensive, so I want to be catching multiple fish. To do that, it often means putting out some bait in the lake, and you really need a dedicated spod rod and reel to do that. I've got here today the Infinity spod rod, which is a 4.5 pound test curve rod, and the Daiwa Emblem Spod 35 SCW QD. The rod itself is really important that it has the same capabilities as the fishing rods that I'm using, because if I'm fishing at 120 yards, I've got to be able to put bait out at that same distance. You know, a spawn when it's fully loaded can weigh sort of 5 or 6 ounces, so you really need a good reliable rod that you can do multiple casts on, and you're not going to get let down by it. This spod rod and reel often is sort of referred to as secondary in importance to your fishing rods, but actually it should be considered equally or if not more important, because you're going to do a lot more casting with this over the course of a session than you do your fishing rods. Yeah, they're the nice rods that you want to play the fish in, but this is the real workhorse that you need to be reliable. So, it's really make sure you invest in the right spod rod and reel to get the job done. So there's a couple more important tips to use. Firstly, I always go with braid on the spod reel. This is 18-pound J braid, and I've got a 40 or 50-pound shock leader on here to absorb the cast you'll be doing. The other really important thing when using braid is, wear a finger stool, because braid has got no stretch in it, and if your spool slips it can give you a nasty cut on your finger, so always wear a finger stool when you're using braid. So since we've arrived, it's taken us a couple of hours to get set up. The bivvies, we've got the rods out, and the weather's taken a complete turn. The wind's really coming in hard, so what I was originally planning on starting with, which was solid bags, I just can't use that anymore. I found that when I've been messing around with the rods, it's taken me sort of 4 or 5, maybe even 6 casts to get it on the spot. And if I was using solid bags, that would just drive me absolutely mad, and it would cost a lot of money and it would waste a lot of time. So basically I'm going to switch to using singles on a heli rig, which means I can keep casting until I get it bang on the spot. Because although it's not what I'd usually do on here, I've just got to adapt because the weather's completely changed. What it also means is that tomorrow, hopefully when the weather calms down, I'll change back to solid bags, because that's what I'm really confident on this lake. So yeah, really I'm waiting for the weather to change and I'll revert back to that tactic. In the meantime, for the next few hours, I'm basically going to be waiting for lulls in the wind, and I'll grab the spod rod as quickly as I can, get as much bait out as I can onto the spot, and hopefully we'll get a few fish. There we go, first one of the session, just over 26 pounds. Came on 2 grains of fake corn, cast as a single due to the wind, meaning we can't fish solid bags. So proves that, adapting to the weather really can pay off, and hopefully now I'll change over to that, we'll get a few more. So I slipped that fish back about an hour ago, and we're now approaching sort of the last hour and a half of daylight, so I need to start thinking about what I want to do tonight. So what I've done is I did change all 3 rods over to the same hook bait and the same rig, because that was obviously what got me the bite. The other thing I've done is I have topped up the spot with a bit more bait. Hopefully that's not the only fish out there, so there might be a few more. So a bit more bait could get me another bite before dark with a bit of luck. I have also made up I've made up a bit more bait for the night, because like I said earlier, the wind has been playing havoc with the fishing today. So I really am desperate for the wind to drop off at some point. And if I've got the bait ready, it doesn't matter if the wind drops off at 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning, I'll get up and I'll put it out there, because I need to make the most of those lulls in the wind and get the bait on the spot so I know it's all fishing accurately. So yeah, hopefully I'll update you in the morning with a few fish. If you can't tell from the video, it's absolutely hammering it down right now. Earlier I mentioned that I'd redone the rods just before dark and topped up the bait. Well, it's paid off big time, because this is part of a triple take, the biggest of the 3, a mid 20 pounder. Let's get her back and see what the rest of the night brings. There we go. 5th fish of the night. It's 2 AM now. It's £35.4. So after 5 fish, we finally got through to one of the bigger fish in the lake. So get that back, see if we can get another one. Well, what a night that was. I've had 5 fish throughout the night, up to 35 pounds. I've had absolutely no sleep, but I'm not complaining, so I can sleep later on. So before the night, I put all the 3 rods onto the same rig, which was double grains of fake corn, and I've spotted a bit of extra bait on there. I got in the bag. About a couple of hours later, I had a triple take, all 3 20s. Biggest was about 26 pounds. I've put them back out, and the key thing that I've done then is carried on spodding. So pitch black, you can hear that not many other people are doing it. They're tucked up in their bags, but this is where you can make a real difference and get a big edge over the other anglers by carrying on the process that you're doing in the day at night. So that means carrying on spodding. You just have to trust that you're using the markers on the horizon properly, and that the bait is going to keep going on to the same spot. But yeah, it worked for me. I carried on spodding throughout the night. 5 fish, finally got to sleep at about 3 o'clock, back up at 5:30, putting more bait out, redoing the rods. So I'm set now for the day, and hopefully things will carry on, because the fish have clearly found the baited area. When you come up to Linear, it's really important that you bring the right bait with you. What I've got here is a mix that I'm happy to take to any of the venues. Like I said earlier, I come up here often without a plan in my head, so I don't know what lake I'm going to end up on. So it's really key for me that the mix that I bring up can be used anywhere. So I'll just run you through what I actually use on that. It's a very simple mix, and it starts off with good old sweet corn. I tend to bring these big catering tins, which is about 2 kilos in there, and I'll use a lot of that. I'll try and bring 4 or 5 cans with me for a weekend, and the fish just absolutely love it. The yellow colour and the sweetness of the bait is a winner up here. And sticking with that yellow theme, I also like to have some boilies in the mix. They helped, have a few larger baits on the bottom that might stay around there longer if there's any nuisance fish, and for that reason I use the Essential Cell. As you can see, they're a really nice yellow colour, which sort of matches the corn, but they're more deterrent to nuisance fish in the lake. On top of those two things, I'll then go with hemp, which is another absolutely great bait that you can use anywhere. I like to try and bring the prepared particles with me because it's easier to store in the car, but if I know I'm going to be doing a big session, I'd rather cook it up at home because it's a lot cheaper. The final thing I'll add into the mix is some liquids, and again, because I'm using the Essential Cell boilies, I've got this Essential Cell stick mix liquid here, so I'll give it a good dose of that just before I start spodding the bait out, and that adds another good layer of attraction. The final thing I'd say is, on some of the venues, some of the lakes up here, I would use pellets, but I don't want to put them in the mix because this is quite a wet mix and the pellets will break down in there and they won't be very good, and you'll lose a lot of their sort of attraction once that happens. So I tend to keep a nice bag of like the Response pellets in a separate bucket or just in the bag, and every now and then I'll add some pellets into the spod and then get those out there as well. So don't put that in your main mix, keep that separate, keep it nice and dry, and you'll get the most benefit out of those pellets that way. So yeah, that's basically the mix I would use up here. I can take that to any of the lakes, and hopefully if you bring the same ingredients, you'll find you'll have the same success too. We're coming into the last few hours of the session now, and unfortunately it's remained fishless. I did lose one on a zig earlier. Unfortunately it kited to my right and got tangled in next door's line. Looking around the lake and speaking to other people, it sounds like not much has happened today for anyone, and it's just one of those days when the fish haven't been feeding. I haven't seen any fish show out in front of me today either, which sort of implies maybe they're up the other end of the lake, or they're just not interested in feeding today. I've got a couple of hours of the session left, so I'm going to put a bit more bait out, and hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll get one more chance before I have to pack up. So we're all packed up now. As you can probably see, I got absolutely soaked packing up, which was a nice way to end the session. We've just got a little break in the rain now, so we've parked in the car park just to quickly do this little summary. So yeah, so how did the session go? Well, it started off exactly as planned. I got in a good swim, found a nice spot, put some bait on it, and had a fish quite quickly. The night then went absolutely mad, had 6 fish up to 35 pounds, but then unfortunately the sort of today seemed to just go dead. The whole lake seemed to shut up. I didn't see any fish showing. I did have a missed chance on a zig, but unfortunately that came off because it got in a bit of a tangle with next door's lines. But on these busy day ticket venues, that's just sort of something that you have to contend with as well. So yeah, basically that was a nice session, and I hope you can take something away from the tips I've gone through over the last day or so. And yeah, good luck and get out there.